In June 2024, Guinness World Records certified 4 world titles for a single facility standing in the Egyptian desert, among them the largest water treatment plant on Earth. It feeds a river that did not exist 5 years ago, 114 kilometers of engineered water cutting through the Sahara, built while Egypt's real river was slipping under foreign control upstream. Can a nation build its way out of running dry? Egypt is roughly 96% desert. More than 105 million people live pressed onto the green ribbon along the Nile. Less than 5% of the country's land. About 90% of Egypt's fresh water comes from that single river, and every drop of it rises beyond Egypt's borders. Divide the supply by the population, and each Egyptian lives on roughly 500 cubic meters a year, about 1,400 liters a day for everything: drinking, washing, industry, and the crops on every plate. Hydrologists consider roughly twice that amount the threshold for water scarcity. There is no second river. The delta fans out north of Cairo, a green triangle pressed against the Mediterranean. West of Alexandria, the coast runs toward El Dabaa, where Egypt is building its first nuclear power plant. Between the two lies the target, a slab of the western desert the size of a small country. The plan is called the New Delta, 2.2 million feddans of new farmland, roughly 9,200 square kilometers, close to the area of Cyprus. Down its spine runs the artery, a man-made river, 114 kilometers long, most of it open canal, 22 kilometers of it underground in steel and concrete pipes 3 meters across. Egypt has tried this before, and the memory stings. In 1959, Egypt and Sudan signed the agreement that still governs the river. 55.5 billion cubic meters a year for Egypt, a figure frozen ever since, while the population roughly tripled. In 1997, President Mubarak launched Toshka, a plan to pump Nile water into the southern desert and create a second valley. It consumed billions and delivered a fraction of the promised farmland. Much of the region stayed sand. Engineers drew one hard lesson from that failure. In Egypt, new land cannot depend on new Nile water because there is no new Nile water. One design decision separates the new delta from Toshka, and it matters more than any other for the rest of this story. First, the pressure had to become unbearable. In 2011, while Egypt was consumed by revolution, Ethiopia broke ground on the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, a wall across the Blue Nile, the branch that delivers the bulk of Egypt's water. Cairo protested. Construction continued. A decade of negotiations produced declarations, deadlines, and no binding agreement on how the dam would operate in a drought. In 2020, Ethiopia began filling the reservoir anyway. Egypt called the dam an existential threat. Ethiopia called it an existential necessity. Half of its 120 million people lack reliable electricity. Which side would you find easier to argue? Then came the date Cairo had dreaded. On September 9, 2025, Ethiopia inaugurated the dam, 145 meters high, nearly 1.8 kilometers across, 5,150 megawatts, Africa's largest power plant, financed largely by Ethiopians themselves, with no water-sharing treaty attached. The reservoir behind it can hold back around 74 billion cubic meters, more than a full year of Egypt's entire water share. Sitting behind a wall Egypt does not control. But Egypt had not spent those years only writing protest letters. In 2021, convoys of bulldozers and excavators rolled into the western desert, and one of the largest earth-moving operations in Africa began. Leveling dunes, cutting ridges, grading a corridor through shifting sand where a single misjudged slope could strand the water mid-desert. Crews worked in rotating shifts through summer heat that routinely passes 110 degrees Fahrenheit, because on this schedule, concrete waits for no season. Here is the decision that separates this project from Toshka. The new river barely touches Egypt's Nile quota. Its main supply is water the country has already used once. Across the northern delta, farm fields constantly shed drainage water, salty, murky, laced with fertilizer, that for generations ran off toward the sea. The new delta captures that runoff and sends it west along a roughly 120-kilometer route to El Hammam, the plant with the 4 world records. Its capacity is 7.5 million cubic meters a day, enough to fill about 3,000 Olympic swimming pools daily. Inside, the water passes through sequential barriers. Screens strain out debris, settling basins let the sediment sink, chemical dosing binds the fine particles, and biological treatment breaks down what remains, until drain water leaves clean enough for irrigation. Then the desert takes over. The riverbed is lined with concrete slabs, because bare Sahara sand drinks water almost as fast as the sun does, and the joints between the slabs are sealed with bitumen so the concrete can breathe through scorching days and cold desert nights. Gravity moves the flow wherever the engineers could use it. Where they could not, pumping stations lift the water toward fields sitting, by Egyptian accounts, more than 100 meters above the level of the Nile. At the far end, center pivot arms sweep in slow circles, and green discs appear in the sand, visible from orbit. There is, however, a limit almost nobody mentions. Recycling does not create water. Every liter flowing through the new river already came out of Egypt's fixed Nile share once. This is a loop, and a loop can only be squeezed so hard. Each pass through the fields leaves the water a little saltier, and hydrologists warn that the old delta needed some of that drainage to flush salt from its own soil and feed the coastal lagoons where fishermen cast their nets. And lifting millions of tons of water uphill every day, forever, is an energy bill that never ends. The new delta lives off the old one, and the old one keeps the receipts. Still, the bet is rational. Egypt is one of the world's largest wheat importers, and recent grain shocks showed how quickly bread prices become a national security problem. The new land is meant to grow grain, vegetables, and feed for industrial cattle farms, cutting the import bill and creating work far from the overcrowded valley. Egyptian estimates put the river's cost around 160 billion Egyptian pounds, on the order of $5 billion at the time. In an economy already heavy with debt, taxpayers carry it either way. Step back far enough, and the two ends of the Nile mirror each other. Ethiopia built its dam without Egypt's consent, because electricity for 120 million people could not wait. Egypt is replumbing its entire share of the river without asking anyone, because food for 105 million cannot wait either. Neither side is villainous, both are cornered. Two nations, one river, no treaty, and both have now poured their answer in concrete. The first fields are turning green, and officials call the targets achievable. The system, though, has never faced its real test. A multi-year drought, with the upstream reservoir holding back water and no agreement on how much must flow. The new farms will demand their millions of cubic meters every single day for decades, regardless of how much rain falls on Ethiopian highlands that Egypt cannot see and does not control. And the loop's chemistry remains an open question. How many cycles the water survives before salt wins is something engineers will only learn by running it. The river is finished. Whether it is enough has not been decided yet, least of all by the sky. So the question Egypt has answered in concrete remains genuinely open. Should a nation this dry spend billions growing wheat in the Sahara? Or would that money buy more food, more safely, on the world market? Economists are split. Cairo did not wait for their verdict. In the desert west of the delta, the water is already moving, proof of what a cornered nation will build long before anyone knows whether it will be enough.